Do you recognize this cat? No? How about this cat? This cat? Okay, well, I know you know this guy. It's time to meet some of the unsung heroes of the Dragon Ball universe. Or are they? It's Neko Majin in Dragon Ball Dissection, Gaiden. Last time we looked at the Dragon Ball prototypes, Dragon Boy and the Adventure of Tongpu, two stories that aren't Dragon Ball and aren't connected to the Dragon Ball narrative, but served to inspire it. Well, that was written and recorded before I preempted this video with the Dr. Slump crossover, so just roll with it. That time, we looked at two stories that inspired Dragon Ball. Last time, we looked at something that's also not Dragon Ball, but featured an obvious Dragon Ball crossover. This time, we're again looking at a series of stories that aren't part of Dragon Ball, but this time, the connections to Dragon Ball and its characters is a bit sneakier. In that sense, Neko Majin is similar to 2013's Jocko the Galactic Patrolman. They're both series that are ostensibly not related to Dragon Ball, but then the Dragon Ball influence slowly creeps in until, by the end, you're looking at full frontal Dragon Ball. The main difference is that while Jocko's trajectory ends with it saying to the audience, "Surprise, it's a prequel," here it says, "Surprise, it's references?" Neko Majin collectively refers to 8 individual stories drawn by Toriyama Akira and spread across 3 different titles: Neko Majin ga Iru, Neko Majin Zetto, and Neko Majin Mike. Yeah, it's pronounced Mike, not Mike. Sorry, Mike, this isn't about you. They exist as randomly appearing one-shots in weekly and monthly Shonen Jump. Whenever Toriyama got the itch to draw magical cats, bam, there'd be a new Neko Majin installment. As such, these 8 chapters were published across 6 years. Structurally, it's interesting to look at the timing of this loose series. The first installment of Neko Majin ga Iru was released in 1999, a little over a year after Dragon Ball GT, and essentially Dragon Ball as a whole ended in Japan. The final installment of Neko Majin Zetto was released in 2005, around the time Dragon Ball was beginning to see a resurgence in its home country, with the release of DVD box sets and new video games. I'd argue that Neko Majin bridged the gap during a time when Dragon Ball was fairly passé. Let's take a look at how. And while I've always known about Neko Majin, I'd never actually read the series before prepping for this video, so this is an exciting new experience for me too. The original Neko Majin ga Iru, or Cat Magical Person is Here, released in 1999 in Weekly Shonen Jump, tells a comedic story of a prankster cat who walks a fine line between being a hero and a menace. Neko Majin falls somewhere in that Bugs Bunny model. He clearly thinks of himself as a hero, but he's also a bit of a sociopath who indulges his own whims, tries to fleece people out of money, and never seems to recognize the harm he's causing. In fact, when he causes harm, he'll usually find a way to blame it on the person he's harmed. He also has just enough charm and persuasion to smooth over those situations. However, his marks are often somewhat unscrupulous people as well, so it's easy to see the humor. The chapter opens with 2 criminals lost in the desert, only for Neko Majin to come riding in, on their motorcycle, which he then offers to sell back to them. When they realize Neko Majin has used up all of their gas, he invites them back to his place and even flies off to retrieve some more gas for them, but he also charges them money for each sip of water he offers them. It's a funny dichotomy. Clearly we relate to the criminals because we can recognize every stupid, underhanded, and infuriating thing Neko Majin is doing. But Neko Majin is the hero in his mind, completely oblivious to the idea that anybody would be frustrated with him, and believing he's much cooler than he actually is. Upon getting their gas, the criminals happily take their leave of this weirdo, only to happen across a rock that Neko Majin had earlier explained to them contained a demon, after they paid him for the privilege. Looking to work out some of their frustrations, they screw with the rock, only to find that Neko Majin was telling the truth after all. The demon escapes and attacks them, and it's Neko Majin to the rescue, for a large fee, which they're now all too happy to pay. After a ridiculous fight, Neko Majin finishes off the demon with his Neko Hameha. Rather than thinking of Neko Majin as a worthless pest, the criminals now believe he's an amazing hero. But there's one more turn. They later run into Neko Majin spending all that money on taiyaki, fish-shaped cakes, before flying to the roof of a local orphanage. They are overcome with emotion, believing that Neko Majin took all that money from them just to feed a bunch of orphans. No. Actually, he just wanted to eat the taiyaki on top of an orphanage. That's Neko Majin. At this opening juncture, the connections to Dragon Ball are fairly tenuous. It's obviously written by the guy who wrote Dragon Ball and contains humorous references to Dragon Ball. Neko Majin is dressed in a similar vest outfit as Majin Buu. His signature attack is a clear reference to the Kamehameha, even down to the same hand pose. It only changes out the Kame for Neko because he's a cat. But those are both fairly small elements of a largely standalone story. It's more playing off of the style and humor of Dragon Ball than playing to it directly. Its big fights and morally dubious hero feel very reminiscent of the first arc of Dragon Ball. That pattern continues with Neko Majin ga iru 2, or Neko Majin is here too, released about half a year later. This time, a couple of aliens arrive to kidnap a little girl as a specimen. While they're out abducting, Neko Majin happens upon their ship, takes it out for a joyride, and damages it. The aliens are furious, but Neko Majin offers to get them a mechanic, although he's annoyed they don't have the money to pay for it. While he has a captive audience, he regales them with stories and tries to introduce them to his pet hamster. He's largely unconcerned with their hostage other than needing to use her cell phone to call the mechanic. He even bonks her on the head when she's too noisy. The only thing that gets him to care about the girl's situation is when she calls Neko Majin's rival, Kobayashi Pete, to save her. Since Neko Majin fancies himself a hero, he fights Pete for the honor of saving the girl. Neko Majin wins the fight and saves the girl, but only after she agrees to pay for the mechanic. He's wonderfully amoral, but he's also a hero because while nobody realizes it, the aliens, in awe of Neko Majin's strength, decide to cancel their planned invasion of Earth. Shockingly, the second Neko Majin installment doesn't have any Dragon Ball references at all, outside of the clothes of the main character, although the design of the aliens will return in future Dragon Ball material. What the second chapter does have is a moment where Neko Majin shares information about his people to the aliens. He explains there are others of his kind on Earth, each representing a breed of cat, while he considers himself a mixed breed. While we never meet the specific Neko Majin mentioned or shown in this chapter, the scene does set the stage for expanding the Neko Majin story beyond this character, which is what happens. In fact, this is the final story to feature the original Neko Majin and the final entry in the Neko Majin ga iru line, which makes me kinda sad. In 2001, Toriyama jumped from Weekly Jump to Monthly Jump with a new iteration of Neko Majin, Neko Majin Zetto, or, you guessed it, Neko Majin Z. Ostensibly, this is because the story focuses on a different Neko Majin named Zetto, but it's really because this is when Neko Majin starts to lean heavily on the Dragon Ball brand. Zetto wears a Goku-style dogi, the title page has him wielding the Nyoibo, while more aliens visit this time around, in the exact same style of ship as before. This time the alien's an honest-to-God Saiyan named Onio, who can transform into a Super Saiyan. Zetto likewise discovers he can transform into a Super Neko Majin. And the title clearly uses the same stylized Z from the Dragon Ball Z anime, which also appears on the titular character's dogi. This is actually far more Z than Toriyama's Dragon Ball ever was, considering his Dragon Ball never used Z in the title. This effectively serves as a soft reboot to Neko Majin. Zetto has a lackadaisical attitude and will invite his rivals back to his house to look at his cool stuff, just like the first Neko Majin. Zeto uses the Neko Hameha, just like the first Neko Majin. Zeto and his unnamed kid companion hustle aliens for money, just like the first Neko Majin. It all ends in a big fight, just like the first Neko Majin. It feels like we've been here before. I don't get why Zeto needed to be a separate character other than the fact that this retooling really wants to hammer home how many Dragon Ball references it can shove in. It makes me wonder why this shift happened. Hey, maybe now that it had been 6 years since Toriyama stopped drawing Dragon Ball, he was hankering to play in that world a bit. Can't blame him for that. Maybe this was a clever meta-commentary on Toei changing the name of his series back in the day. He's asserting that, despite the shiny new branding, nothing of substance really changes. Or maybe he was under some kind of pressure to appeal to the popularity of his famous series. I honestly don't know whether or not Neko Majin had a lot of eyes on it prior to this. Maybe he felt he needed to appeal to the Dragon Ball crowd to get people to care. I can understand that too. You better believe I'm going to feel the need to do that to promote this video. But if that is the case, it's a little depressing. And it does feel distracting, as though the story is having to compete for time amid all the winking at the audience. But that's not to say this isn't fun. Believe it or not, I like Dragon Ball, so seeing Neko Majin parody its elements certainly gets some laughs from me. And I can't deny recalling that the Dragon Ball stuff added some buzz back in the day. See, Onio's story is that he and his new wife decide to spend their honeymoon on Earth. After Zeto beats him up and sends him on his way, Onio returns in 2003's Neko Majin Zeto ni, or 2. This time, however, Onio has brought his boss, or rather the son of his boss, to fight instead. See, Onio, like any good Saiyan, works for Freeza, who is alive, and it turns out that Freeza has a son named Kuriza. He has a chestnut-shaped head, which is Kuri in Japanese, so Freeza becomes Kuriza. Get it? Yeah, toss him in with all the other Freeza clones we've been subjected to over the decades. But at the time, this was a big deal. I'm pretty sure this was how I first heard about Neko Majin because everyone in 2003 was talking about how Freeza has a son. Kuriza even appeared as a playable character later that year in the video game Dragon Ball Z 2, although only as an alternate skin for Freeza. And this was only in the Japanese version, so sorry Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2 fans. With Onio and Kuriza staying at Zeto's house until the latter finds time in his busy schedule to fight them again, Toriyama found the time to create another branch in the Neko Majin family. The same month as Neko Majin Zeto ni, Weekly Shonen Jump premiered Neko Majin Miike, the only standalone installment in the Neko Majin series. This focuses on yet another Neko Majin, this one named Miike, short for Miike Neko, or tortoiseshell cat, what they call calico. And yes, it will be hard for me to read my script without pronouncing this as Mike. Miike awakens from a long slumber and gets reacquainted with his friend Kojiro, who has grown up to be a teacher. Miike spends the chapter trying to instill Kojiro with self-confidence by using his shape-shifting powers. He transforms into a local monster to make Kojiro think he's defeated said monster. Then he transforms into Kojiro to teach Kojiro's students some respect. I really like Neko Majin Miike. It's something fresh and new. Unlike Zeto, Miike is different enough to justify being a brand new character. He's still a trickster, but he has different powers, different priorities. And you might have noticed there's nary a direct Dragon Ball reference to be found. That's not to say that tying into Dragon Ball is inherently bad, but by this point in my reading, I was enjoying the Neko Majin premise, and it was nice to get to see it stand on its own 2 feet. Enjoy it while it lasts! As long as we're here, I want to do some quick shoutouts. This period of Dragon Ball dissection is forcing me to scramble for resources, given that I'm looking at pieces of media that are more obscure. Thank you very much to iChaos of Seed of Might, both for being a patron and for providing me with the Neko Majin scans you're seeing in this video. Seed of Might just put out a wonderful digital release of the Dragon Ball Kanzenban as well. And I also thank, as always, kanzenchu.com for their amazing informational resources on this series and the Dragon Ball franchise as a whole. If you want to know anything and everything Dragon Ball in the hopes of enlightening and entertaining yourself, that's your one-stop shop. What can I say? It's always the fans who step up. Let's continue on. 2004 saw Neko Majin Zetto-san, or 3, return to monthly Shonen Jump, and this time Toriyama was bringing in the big fan service guns. Yeah, Zetto goes toe-to-toe with Vegeta himself. I do have to say he gets a wonderful introduction. Vegeta arrives in his space pod right as Zetto, Onio, Kuriza, and the kid are playing soccer. Zetto mistakes the pod for the ball and slams it into the ground. Love it. Can you guess how the rest of the chapter goes? If you said that Zetto and the kid try to make money off of Vegeta, Zetto and Vegeta fight, then Vegeta gets scared, pretends he has to take an important phone call and leaves. Congratulations! You know how to recognize patterns. Well, you probably didn't guess the fake phone call part as the specific excuse, but it is really funny. You're also probably wondering though, with all this talk of Super Saiyans, Frieza's kid, Vegeta working for Freeza, when in Dragon Ball is any of this supposed to take place? Anyway, Neko Majin Zetto-yon, or 4, premiered in Monthly Jump later that same year. Onio and Kuriza are gone somehow, but naturally another Dragon Ball character shows up. This time it's Majin Buu, who surprises the kid by having a lot of the same powers as his buddy, Zetto. Buu wants the kid to call him when Zetto shows up so they can fight. With Majin Buu hanging around, you're probably wondering when in Dragon Ball any of this is supposed to take place. In this installment, Zetto has a new rival, Usa Majin. Just like Neko Majin is a cat magical person, Usa Majin refers to Usagi, a rabbit magical person. Usa Majin has taken the sources of power from all the other Neko Majin and plans to do the same to Zetto by exploiting his weakness, threatening his Son Goku Dragon Box action figure. With Zetto rendered helpless, all seems lost until the kid remembers Majin Buu's request. He calls Buu, tells him that Usa Majin is Zetto, and Buu proceeds to beat the crap out of him. I think this is an improvement over the last few Z installments. It breaks away from the formula, I'm happy to say. While the Dragon Ball references are back in full force, calling out a very specific action figure is creatively absurd. The references are also not prevalent enough to get in the way of the storytelling. Majin Buu doesn't take over the chapter, he pops in and out as needed. Had the series ended here, it would have been on a high note. But it didn't. In 2005 came Neko Majin Zetto Go, or 5. In it, Zetto's master Son Goku himself finally arrives. Yep, we've made it to Fonzie levels of guest star. You may clap. They spar for a while, Goku recruits him for help against a foe at his house, they head over to the Son family compound and reveal that the enemy is a mouse. Because Neko Majin is a cat. Get it? It certainly breaks away from the formula. Yeah, this is the weakest chapter. Clearly my opinions have varied from chapter to chapter, but this is the only one I can honestly say I don't think is good. Even the characters calling out how lame a joke this chapter is predicated on isn't enough to save it from being a lame joke. I wouldn't have minded it if it was just a lame punchline. I think bad jokes are funny. But this whole chapter is pretty thin and is a very long excuse to get to that lame joke, and it's hoping you won't notice because it's packed to the gills with fan service. It's not just Goku who shows up, so do Chi-Chi, Goten, Gyumao, Oob, and Pan. For one panel! No Gohan, though. What is up with Dragon Ball spin-offs totally ignoring Gohan? However, I can definitely see the appeal of this, especially in 2005. I looked at Kanzenshuu forum posts from the time, then known as Daizenshuu EX, and found users saying they thought it was the best chapter. Unlike the other Dragon Ball cameos, this actually gives fans a glimpse at what happens after the end of the series. Pan is older, Oob is apparently living with them, he too was wearing a Goku-style dogi. It offers an alternative to Dragon Ball GT. I can't tell you how many people I still see arguing that this proves that Goku did not, in fact, abandon his family at the end of Dragon Ball. Heck, even today this seems novel given how adverse Dragon Ball has been to move beyond the end of the original series. This one panel, which I remind you, is only about Goku's family excited a cat is going to catch a mouse, is probably more well known than anything else in Neko Majin, just because it could possibly, maybe, kinda be an actual continuation to Dragon Ball. There is power in that. There's power in it now, and there was especially power in it when this was the most new Dragon Ball content anybody was getting. This is the only chapter of Neko Majin to have been released in English in the American Shonen Jump. Obviously, I wouldn't be covering this at all were it not for the Dragon Ball connections. When I said I was going to be covering this, lots of people in the comments were still debating whether or not this was the canon sequel to Dragon Ball. It certainly didn't help that I posted this on the same day that Dragon Ball Daima ended, and its perceived inconsistencies with other branches of the series had fans feverishly debating its canonicity. I gotta say, I'm really tired of that term. Heck, I made fun of it and tried to sidestep it in the very first episode of Dragon Ball Dissection. So is this the canon sequel? I don't know. I don't think so. But I don't care. Frankly, as much as the Dragon Ball elements threaten to completely smother this series, what I like about it is how brazenly it thumbs its nose at the very idea of canon. Neko Majin defiantly exists completely outside of any such argument, defying anyone to categorize it as such. It's refreshing to see Dragon Ball exist outside of a serialized narrative for nothing but the lulz. Vegeta can just pop in wearing Cell Arc armor while still working for Freeza. Majin Buu can wander into the story like an itinerant sitcom character doing a random cameo. Freeza can have a son, whose existence is nothing but a head-scratcher and whose continued presence is nary a concern to anybody and anything that matters. That's another reason why I think the last chapter is the weakest one. To see Oob as Goku's disciple and Pan as slightly older places this firmly as a follow-up to the end of the original Dragon Ball in a way that feels so much more locked, so much more portentous than the freewheeling nature of the rest of the series. This isn't in continuity with anything, it's just a big old cat meme, and I like that. It literally just occurred to me, though, that given Dragon Ball Super's placement in the timeline and how it brings Frieza back to life, that actually makes Neko Majin fit quite a bit easier than I was giving it credit for. Major coincidence? Or all part of the master plan? Still, though, Neko Majin is an important evolutionary step in the history of Dragon Ball. Like I said at the beginning, it helped bridge the classic and modern eras. It features the Dragon Box DVD diorama figure. Those box sets were coming out at the time. The manga was being re-released in its Kanzenban or Perfect editions. One of Neko Majin's characters was being featured in the hot new Dragon Ball video game. 2006 saw a manga crossover with One Piece, the new big boy on the block, called Cross Epoch. The pump was being primed for more Dragon Ball, for real Dragon Ball, and that would come in 2008 with Heya, Son Goku and his friends return, which we will be covering next time in Dragon Ball Dissection. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you know the drill by now that I'm a relatively small YouTuber and need your support to keep me alive and fed to do all these videos because ad revenue doesn't cut it. You know to go to patreon.com/MrFusion to check out the reward tiers, and don't do it through the Apple app because that charges extra. So I won't dwell on that. Instead, I'll answer the question at least 5 of you are probably asking. No, I'm not reviewing Cross Epoch. It is such fluff that it makes a gag manga like this look like a multi-generational epic. It's the kind of promotional comic you'd get in a cereal box. It's just little vignettes of Dragon Ball characters teamed up with One Piece characters, and I think the Dragon Ball characters are in the One Piece aesthetic. I don't know. I don't know anything about One Piece. Nothing really happens in this story. I'm sure it's a fun novelty if you're into it. I'm not knocking it. It's just fluff. That's really all I have to say about Cross Epoch. I guess I just did review it. And that explains why it's not getting its own video. I'll see you next time!